Attention terrorists, hold on. Here's Tara's Daily Rant.
Good morning. Hope you had a great weekend. This is, joining me now, Attorney General Alan Wilson, state of South Carolina, fresh from his, I guess you could call it a victory, putting Alec Murdaugh in prison for the rest of his life. You got this conviction with no DNA evidence, right? That's the gold standard now. You got to have the DNA evidence because everybody watches TV. There's always the hair, right? And that convicts them. You didn't have that. But what you did do is use technology that in a way that we have never seen used, at least in a case of this caliber before. You literally had really almost Paul Murdaugh's voice from beyond the grave. Because of the video he had recorded. You hear Alec's voice in the background. That did him in, but also the use of the OnStar data. I had no idea my car could convict me. And I bet you Alec Murdaugh didn't either, that there was that kind of detail in the car. Could you tell us a little bit about how you came to use that data? That's really new.
No, absolutely, Tara. Well, first off, it was a completely circumstantial case.
Yeah.
But a lot of people think somehow circumstantial evidence isn't as powerful as direct evidence, but that's entirely untrue, as we just proved last week. But like you said, let's go back to the car. We didn't get the OnStar data until the middle of the trial. We didn't even know about some of the. Yeah, well, OnStar, the company, was obviously watching the trial along with the rest of the world, and they had overheard us, talking about how we were unable to get information from the telemetry system, and so someone at OnStar said, "Well, we can provide that." So they reached out to us and said, "We can get that to you." So we had attempted to get that over a year ago, but weren't able to successfully get it. Once we got that information, and just to give you an idea, OnStar, as well as the onboard black box or telemetry system that not only gives you your GPS, but it gives you things like when you're clicking your seatbelt, when you're doing a blinker, when you're rolling your windows up or down. I mean, it gets into very, molecular detail on how you're operating your car. And so we were able to get that information, and we were able to triangulate it and obviously overlay it with the data we got from the download from Maggie and Paul's phone, as well as Alec's phone. We were obviously able to overlay that with the car details, as well as the testimony of people. We did have some of Maggie's DNA on one of the guns. There was a trace amounts of blood. So, we were able to overlay all of that. And I think the biggest piece of evidence for many people was Alec Murdaugh's lies, his ongoing lies that he trapped himself in.
Lying to investigators.
That's right. And if you remember, during the course of this investigation and the story, the murders occurred in June. Alec, basically had 3 separate SLED interviews, not counting the deputy from Colleton County that showed up at the scene of the crime, as well as the 911 call, and a 911 call, rather. In all of those circumstances, he was giving a narrative that he was not down at those kennels and he did not see anyone at that time. The only witness we had was Rogan Gibson, who was the last person to have a conversation with Paul Murdaugh about the dog, the infamous dog tail. And that was moments before the murders occurred. Rogan had told law enforcement that he thought he heard Alec's voice. He believed it was Alec's voice, but Alec says, no, he must have been mistaken, because it was at that point, he said. Well, in April of 2022, I believe, they were able to get the video out of Paul's phone some 9 or 10 months later. And that video is the video that the whole world watched, that had Alec literally there 3 minutes before the murders occurred.
Unbelievable. In a way, to me, this case revolutionizes, this idea of, if we start using OnStar data in your car and things like that, phone, all of the tracking, in a weird way, getting away with murder is pretty close to obsolete. You just almost can't escape that tracking net between the phone and the car.
No, it's very difficult to do. And again, it's also what you don't do. You're looking for people's break-in habits. For instance, Alec Murdaugh was never without his phone, but he was conveniently without his phone during the time he was at the kill. He left it at the house, but anywhere else before, so people testified. So, obviously that doesn't prove, mere presence isn't proof of that he committed the crime, but it's what you don't do, not having your phone on you, not using, it was the fact that Paul wasn't responding to Rogan Gibson at 8:49 and 35 seconds. It was what people aren't doing that tells a story. That's how we knew that Paul had been murdered at that time.
Alan Wilson, you are the Attorney General of South Carolina, but you're also an attorney. In your opinion, did Alec Murdaugh make a mistake taking the stand?
Absolutely. I mean, this is a guy who had spent his entire career, Tara, standing in front of juries, probably in that very courthouse, and definitely in that very courthouse, standing in front of juries and winning major verdicts for his clients, making millions of dollars over decades of being an attorney. And he believed that he was capable of talking his way out of anything. He could manipulate juries. He could convince juries to believe his view of the case. And in my mind, when he took the stand that day, he was giving his final closing argument to this jury. And from what I understand from their interviews is that they didn't have any of it. They didn't believe him. He came off not very credible and, frankly, locked himself into his lies even more.
South Carolina Attorney General Alan Wilson, fresh from what you can only call a victory, putting Alec Murdaugh away for life, but they're not done with him yet. We have the Gloria Satterfield trial coming up. Could you give us kind of a preview of that?
Well, yes. Obviously, you heard a great deal of information in the murder case about a number of Alec Murdaugh's other victims that he had stolen from, lied to, manipulated, cheated. And these were all of the part of the gathering storm that the state made the argument was coming, that he was going to be revealed, which is why he made that last desperate attempt to preserve his way of life. Gloria Satterfield was one of the primary people that we talked about. Obviously, her son, Tony Satterfield, took the stand in the trial of Alec Murdaugh for the double murder of his wife and son. Gloria, as many people already know, if you've watched the Netflix or HBO Max special, had worked for the Murdaugh family for many, many, many years. And in 2018, she tripped, and I'm doing allegedly, but tripped and fell on the steps of their home in Moselle and hit her head, and obviously lived for about a week, but subsequently died. Alec Murdaugh, as we put into this past trial, had basically had his offered her sons rather the opportunity to sue his insurance carrier over his home, and ultimately got a friend of his to set up as the personal representative for the estate, got someone else to be an attorney for the family, and then basically got these insurance proceeds from her death. Basically, it was a friendly lawsuit in which he got all the money and they got nothing. That's ultimately what happened, and that's what came out at trial. But beyond that, we're going to give Gloria Satterfield and her family their day in court. Tara, one of the things a lot of people ask me is, why are you going to continue going after the financial crimes when you've already got 2 consecutive life sentences against Alec Murdaugh? Is that the best use of state's resources? And this is what I would say to them, whether you're Gloria Satterfield or any one of the dozens of people who were cheated by Alec Murdaugh, those victims deserve their day in court as well. And so the state is going to give them the opportunity to be heard in court and to have their crimes represented and have him held accountable for those crimes. And if by chance we get him, convicted on at least 3 or more, that is another life sentence, which we could use to hedge against an appeal on the murder charges. So it all works together very well. But again, at the end of the day, those victims deserve their day in court as well.
Are we going to learn where that $4 million went in this trial? Because that seems to be a question mark.
Well, a lot of people have asked us about that. And what I've basically said is that if you look, and I have looked, if you look at how they were living their lives, it's not that was all that money going to opioid pills. Of course not. That's too much money for that amount of opioids. But Alec Murdaugh was living a lifestyle that was well beyond his means. And every time, he was playing a shell game. He was double leveraged on multiple properties. He was living a life that he could not afford for decades. And that money was basically helping him stay one step ahead of complete financial and social ruin. And the further he got into it, the more he stole. Like you said, you don't just steal $4 million and that's the first time. You've done it before. And so I don't think there's a treasure chest buried in the back of Moselle, or there's a trunk with a bunch of cash in it somewhere. I truly do believe that they were spending it as they went along.
But at the same time, there's this weird thing that I want to ask you about very quickly, where John Marvin, his brother, and Buster would just like show up at the scene of the crime almost. In this case, we watch Alec Murdaugh go to, his bond is tonight. He's in jail, and they go to Vegas and start gambling. Are they going to be part of this trial, John Marvin and Buster? I kind of want to know where they got the money to gamble. I mean, Buster wasn't employed at the time. It's a weird thing to do, but it's a great way to clean up money.
Well, one of the things I want to be careful to do is not to make comments or not make comments.
I understand
on something
completely.
Yeah. And you have to ask these questions. You're asking questions that probably your listeners are asking themselves, and I understand that. It's not a bad question to ask, but I just have to be careful that I don't say anything that could compromise this case moving forward. And so I'm just going to tell people that I know there's a lot of questions. If the state has evidence that we can prove beyond a reasonable doubt someone committed a crime, you have my word, we'll go after them.
Terrorists wanted. Hear the Tara Show weekday mornings on 106.3 WORD and the Odyssey app.